So I watched every single Uwe Boll video game movie, and I'm really worried I'm starting to like them. So if you've never heard of Uwe Boll, he occupies a special place in film history. In a world of Tommy Wiseaus and Neil Breens, he sits as arguably the best maker of bad films, particularly in the niche world of video game adaptations. Frankly, the fact that studios and investors continue to greenlight his projects after over 2 decades of this stuff is a genuine mystery, one that's arguably more intriguing than anything that Uwe Boll has actually put on screen. I mean, who's signing these checks? Is it a tax thing? It feels like a tax thing. Yeah, there's something perversely fascinating about terrible movies, isn't there? Like, I think I've probably had more fun watching films that are widely considered shit than movies that everyone raves about. And as someone who enthusiastically indulges in cinematic train wrecks, I felt like it was basically my civic duty to watch every single one of Uwe Boll's video game movies. All of them, every single one. Kind of. I totally forgot about Bloodrayne 3, and some I might have watched at 2 times speed. What can I say? I'm only human. But anywho, consider this an act of public service or something. I would say there's a spoiler warning in effect from here on in, but honestly, you don't need to watch these films, and they'd also need a plot to spoil. Let's begin our odyssey with House of the Dead, a film so loosely based on its source material. It seems Big Boy Boll glanced at the arcade game once, shrugged and figured, yeah, close enough. The plot features a group of young, vaguely attractive people who inexplicably decide that attending a rave on a secluded island is a fantastic idea. Of course, zombies quickly crash the party, presumably to turn off the awful generic techno music and get rid of all of those early 2000s fashion faux pas. Now, to be fair, Uwe Boll did actually try something pretty interesting with this flick. He spliced actual footage from the arcade game into live-action sequences, which when described in isolation, could be pretty cool. But like I said, this film has basically nothing to do with the game, so it's just jarringly weird. Like, you might as well have just dropped Stardew Valley gameplay into Schindler's List. It'd make about as much sense. There's also a rave in front of the Sega logo. And let's not overlook the acting. Or rather, the diluted fruit cordial version of acting we got here. Performances range from wooden to outright confused, with dialogue delivered as if the actors themselves are trying desperately to figure out what the fuck this movie's about.
You created it all so you could be immortal. Why?
It's simultaneously painful and delightful. Plus we get the immortal line,
Bro, we are gonna do the humpty bumpty.
Come on, baby.
Humpty bumpty.
oh my god, I love that line. To be fair, out of all the films on this list, I actually quite like this one. Don't get me wrong, it's unforgivably bad, but in the way you can kind of enjoy with drinks and friends. Next we arrive at Alone in the Dark, another film in which Uwe almost seems to go out of his way to avoid the source material. Christian Slater stars as Edward Carnby, a paranormal investigator whose backstory is explained through an opening crawl of text so dense and convoluted, it makes War and Peace look like a breezy beach read. In fact, the film's overly elaborate mythology appears to be deliberately constructed to obscure the fact that nothing happening on screen makes any logical sense whatsoever. Mr. Slater attempts to navigate the chaos with what can only be described as admirable confusion, frequently looking like a man riddled with regret for taking on this role. Alongside him is Tara Reid, cast in the highly believable role of brilliant archaeologist, which honestly even then feels like a massive troll job. Her lines are delivered with the dead-eyed, vacant stare of a wrestling backstage interview. And boy howdy, I've seen some bad wrestling backstage interviews. The film's action sequences are a particular treat. CGI creatures lumber awkwardly through the scenes, with rendering quality reminiscent of PlayStation 1 era cutscenes. And now actually, while I think about it, that might actually be the strongest link to the original game. But for real, while not quite up to the high standards of House of the Dead, this is still a pretty entertaining film in the right headspace. Nonsensical and not very good, but silly enough to kill 90 minutes. Then comes Bloodrayne, Uwe Boll's ambitious yet bewilderingly incompetent take on vampire lore, the game of the same name, and whatever else happened to catch his interest during production. Featuring an alarmingly high-profile cast, including Ben Kingsley, Michelle Rodriguez, and inexplicably Meatloaf. Bloodrayne tells the story of Rain, a half-vampire bent on avenging her mother's murder. While that sounds straightforward enough, the mad lad Boll somehow manages to craft a narrative that is simultaneously simplistic, yet utterly incomprehensible. Ben Kingsley, who I must stress was by this point an Academy Award-winning actor, spends most of his screen time just staring into the middle distance. I'm not even joking. Michelle Rodriguez, meanwhile, approaches her role with some actual intensity, which would be admirable if only the script gave us something, anything, to genuinely react to. Meatloaf's presence, on the other hand, just feels like some sort of cosmic joke, and honestly I'm genuinely here for it. The action is real bad here, and looks like it was choreographed by someone whose only exposure to swordplay was watching a single episode of Xena Warrior Princess. Honestly, some of the fights just look like interpretive dance with sharp objects. The editing is equally atrocious, with these rapid cuts that make scenes difficult to follow and unintentionally hilarious at the same time. If nothing else, Bloodrayne exists as a testament to Uwe Boll's uncanny ability to assemble genuine talent and then just utterly squander it, which is impressive in its own right. It is still worth watching for Meatloaf though, I'm just saying. Oh god, I forgot I had to watch Postal. Based on the controversial video game known primarily for shock humor and gratuitous violence, Postal attempts satire with the subtlety and nuance of a sledgehammer. I'm not even really going to go into the plot because, frankly, it doesn't make sense. There's cult leaders, there's Bin Laden, no. But Uwe Boll's attempt at humour here seems to involve throwing every offensive idea he could muster onto the screen in the hopes that just anything might stick. Like, imagine the sort of stuff an edgy 15-year-old would say, and you're pretty much there. Dave Foley, aka Flick from A Bug's Life, inexplicably stars, delivering each line with the vim of someone whose financial necessities forced him into the role. The film careens wildly from one tasteless joke to another, missing the mark so consistently, it almost feels intentional. Honestly, it's so bad, it's almost impossible to look away. And of all the films on this list, this is the one that's going to leave you feeling the dirtiest. But hey, Uwe Boll plays himself, that's something, right? Actually, no. He claims, in an attempt at meta-humor, that all of his movies are funded by Nazi gold. Oh, fucking hell. And speaking of fucking hell, next we find ourselves confronted by In the Name of the King, a Dungeon Siege tale. Based on the Dungeon Siege games, which I've not played, and I have very little inclination to do so after watching this film. Double-odd bastard Jason Statham stars as Farmer, a character whose defining trait appears to be his occupation, presumably because a deeper characterization was deemed unnecessary. Old Farmer Boy finds himself battling orcs, dark magic, and his dwindling self-esteem across the inexplicably bloated 2-hour runtime. Fuck, I watched this whole thing. Ugh. Supporting Statham are Ray Liotta and Burt fucking Reynolds. Honestly, how does he keep getting these people in these films? But honestly, Ray Liotta is actually pretty funny to watch, chewing the scenery with a vigor suggesting he's absolutely taking the piss the entire way through. But Reynolds, on the other hand, and quite understandably, oscillates between visible confusion and mild irritation, which honestly, once you start noticing that, it does make his scenes pretty brilliant. Like most of the films on this list, action scenes in Dungeon Siege are plentiful, but unremarkable, consisting mostly of chaotic swordplay, exquisitely awful CGI creatures, and extras looking like they're just gritting their teeth until they can get to catering. But here's the absolute mental thing. They let him direct two bloody sequels to this schlock. In the Name of the King 2, Two Worlds sees Dolph Lundgren replace Jason Statham, portraying a modern-day soldier transported to medieval times. Because why not? I'm long past caring, do whatever the fuck you want. Lundgren, bless his heart, he does actually try, but, I mean, why? Why bother when this is what you're working with? Jesus. And then we've got In the Name of the King 3, The Last Mission, with Dominic Purcell filling in because I imagine everyone else was just too expensive by this point. Now, I won't lie, I didn't actually get around to watching this one, but can you really blame me at this point, please? I can't do it anymore. But Uwe Boll's cinematic ambitions aren't just limited to horror, medieval fantasy, or tasteless shock humor. No, he also tried to tackle action thriller territory with Far Cry, which is a personal sore spot for me because I freaking love the original Far Cry games. I always thought the mix of tropical landscapes, violence, and soft sci-fi would make for a great film. But they just had to give it to Uwe fucking Boll, didn't they? Til Schweiger as Jack Carver is emotionless, the villain's master plan is vague nonsense involving genetically modified soldiers, and every scene drags like the whole crew was being paid by the minute. Action sequences, which you would think would be the saving grace of this film, are less thrilling chases and more leisurely jogs around generic warehouses. In fact, warehouses appear so weirdly frequently, it's like Uwe received a bulk discount for filming in abandoned industrial spaces. So much for the tropical beaches. So that's about as much Uwe Boll as I could handle making this video. But you know what? For the most part, I actually had quite a good time watching all of these train wrecks. There's something weirdly comforting about them. You can just switch your brain off and enjoy all the mistakes, shoddiness, and unintentional humor without getting bogged down with silly things like plot, character development, or anything like that. They're all just about competently put together and financed, that as long as you know what you're putting yourself in for, there's a lot of fun to be had. Or maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment, who knows. Either way, I salute you, Uwe Boll. Please don't ever challenge me to a boxing match. But if you've seen any of these films, and dare I ask whether you have a favourite, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to read your thoughts. And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe for plenty more videos on all things film and TV. Check out our video game channel, UDS Gaming, and you can always visit UpsideDownShark.com to keep up with everything else we've got going on. Until then, my name is Tom, this has been UDS, and we'll see you next time. Bye!